Recently had a bunch of people asking me about why I carry with an RMR, a red dot sight RDS, or this particular one's a Trigicon ruggedized miniature reticle RMR. And people ask me why I carry with it. and so this is my everyday carry gun, HK VP9 with an RMR on it. I've got my training barrel in it because I've been doing some dry fire with it. And I just took my Mantis unit off because it died and I need to charge it. So let's talk about this a little bit. Why do I carry with an RMR? So some of this was prompted by a podcast that I listened to this week while I was working out, and it was a ballistic radio episode. And John Johnson is an acquaintance of mine, and he had Carl Rain, who is also an acquaintance of mine, on the show, and it was a fantastic episode. And in particular, Carl was talking about red dot sights on pistols, and the fact that he thought that a green laser, that a laser sight was far preferable to an RMR, to a slide-mounted red dot, for most people. And of course, if you go listen to the episode, I'll put a link to it in the description, and I really think you should. I think if you're interested in RMRs, it's a good episode to listen to. And if you look at that, he goes, well, man, I think that at the top level shooters get about 5 to 10% out of the red dot, and when they put it in people's hands, they went from novice shooters all the way up through grandmasters, and when they found that, what they found was that most people were far better, far quicker with a green laser or better with a backup iron sights on a red dot than they were with the red dot alone. So I think a lot of people kind of, maybe some listeners said, oh, John, you carry an RMR. What do you think of that? So I think it's a worthwhile topic for discussion. Now, let me say at the outset that I have nothing but respect and admiration for a guy like Carl Rain. Carl is a 4-division USPSA Grandmaster, okay? That dude can flat shoot. He is way better than I am with a gun, and I got nothing but respect. I got respect for John at Ballistic Radio. If you've ever watched the guy shoot, he can flat shoot, and he's not a big fan of the red dots either. So I want to just preface that by saying I am not starting an internet squabble. I don't have any problems with those guys, but I do and will continue to carry my RMR. But I think the biggest thing that they have going, that I think that is worthwhile, is a discussion that a lot of people like to buy equipment, and out of that equipment, they try to buy skill with equipment. And that's not just the shooting industry. I think, I used to golf, and in golf, people will try to buy the latest and greatest clubs thinking that a new set of irons will make them a better golfer, when the reality is, once you're an advanced level of golfer, well, then they might provide a little bit of difference. But for most average golfers, more time on the driving range, more time under instruction, more time actually out on the golf course is what they need. Well, same thing. I think people try to buy skill here. And, they go, oh, if I just have the latest and greatest, and maybe they buy a Roland Special, a Glock with the comp and all this stuff. I call this, this is my version of a nobody special. But, people say, well, I'll just buy the RMR and I won't have to aim so much. Guys, that's just not true. I mean, the reality is, if you're going to use a rear, a slide-mounted optic like this, it's going to take you a bunch of work to get to use. And so I really only recommend this for intermediate to advanced level shooters. In fact, I would say my level of shooting right now is probably about as low as I recommend for an RMR. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have one or you should have one, but I am saying they do take quite a bit of work. When I first started with the RMR, I started working a little bit with Scott Jedlinski from a distance. Scott lives cross country from me. But the first thing he said is, John, I want you to do 1,200 to 1,500 dry fire presentations before you ever take a live fire shot. So that meant I had to go get this sucker put on, and then I had to spend a ton of time just dry fire, bang, and pull the gun back in, bang, and do what Scott asked me to do 1,200 to 1,500 times before I ever was putting this on my carry gun. Now that meant I had to have a second slide, and so I had a bunch invested in it right from the giddy up. And then I had to put a bunch of dry fire time in until I could really drive that gun out and see my dot every time. Then I had to get out on the range and start putting live rounds through it, start learning to track the dot, which is a different skill than irons, and then learning how to be as fast on the dot inside of 5 yards and 7 yards and 10 yards as I was with the irons, because I have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds through pistol with irons, and you probably have at least, maybe hundreds to thousands of rounds through a pistol with irons. And so listen, if you're going to go with a red dot, I think that you have to recognize that you're going to have to train yourself to a high level of proficiency in order to get anything out of it. It's not going to give you some magic skill upgrade. It is not handgunning +2. This isn't a magic implement. You have to do the work, and most people won't do the work. You have to do the work. So with that in mind, why do I use it? Well, it took me a little bit of time to get where, when I drove that gun out there, that I see the dot every single time, that I find it, that I don't have to look for it, that magic, I believe it's Aaron Count who calls it the magic red dot fairy, shows up and brings me a dot. And that takes consistency and presentation. It takes getting that same grip every time, driving the gun out. That takes a lot of myelination. And so that took me some time. It took me time to get to that place where when I drive the gun out, I'm as fast on the dot as I am on my irons. But I am. And so for me, the gun does not operate any less well from 0 to 15 yards. But where it shines is beyond that. Now, this is advanced handgunning stuff, and I'm not saying I'm an advanced handgun student, but I am saying that this is something that I want to be able to use. And what really got me thinking about those longer shots was me being a pastor. And many of you guys know I was a pastor for 15 years until very recently, actually. And what happened there was I started looking at my church and recognizing that in my environment, that a 20 to 30 yard shot, if God forbid we were to have an active murderer or we were to have something like that, and then we were out, in the mall and stuff like that, and I realized, man, I'm good inside 15 yards, man. I can run irons, great, but outside 15 yards, man, those shots start becoming very difficult and they start becoming hard to make sure that I get on target. And then what I found was, man, when I had the dot on my pistol, this particular one's an RMO1 with a 3.25 MOA dot, that this is the easy button, anything past 15 yards. And actually that was kind of confirmed to me at the Rangemaster Instructor Reunion in November, where we did the Rangemaster Bullseye course, and we started all the way at 25 yards. And of course, there were some incredible shooters there, and guys were getting their stuff on target, but it was the guys, a couple of us that had the RMR, that were inside the black all the way through at that distance. Now, we weren't necessarily the best shooters. I'm not saying all things considered we were better. Far from it. But at those distances, that made it the easy button. I really like that. The other thing I really like is that at any distance, I am working on a single focal plane, that I can stay threat focused, which I really think is going to happen to your mind and your brain. And again, if you are a very high level shooter and you're processing your sights at a very high level, and you're really not hard front sight focused, but you're target focused with an awareness of your front sight, which I think the best shooters actually do. And I know that's heresy and it's going to get me in all kinds of trouble, but the guys that I talk to and the gals that I talk to are at the very top. That's kind of what they do. And so maintaining that single focal plane is easier for me with the dot than it is trying to learn to do that and to relearn it with the irons. And so it works and it makes sense to me for that. But recognize, I've put, gosh man, since I put the dot on, I've put about 3,000 rounds through this gun to get comfortable with it. And I put, so far, I think about 5,000 dry fire presentations with it. Now then, I can shoot this guy out to 60, 80, 100 yards, and I don't even have to think about it, honestly. Put the dot on it, and then you put the biscuit in the basket. Really easy. Press the trigger straight to the rear. The gun does what you want it to do. Don't got to worry about sight alignment. Don't got to worry about those things at distance. Now, I don't think I'm going to be taking a 100-yard shot in anything resembling a realistic encounter. But I do think at church or other places like that, that the 25 to 35 to 40-yard shot is a distinct possibility, and I want to be able to make that shot. I also think it makes a precision shot, even at closer distances, if I have a little bit more time, an easier proposition, because once again, I'm not worried about sight alignment. I'm not worried about the movement of my sights. I can just put the dot where I want the bullet to go. If I know my offsets at any distance, I can hit it very accurately, a little bit faster, in my opinion. So is a red dot right for you? I'm not saying that it is. I think if you're a beginning shooter, don't try to buy skill. The $1,000, honestly, that you're going to invest putting a red dot on a production pistol is probably better spent on ammo and training, and spend the time getting great with your irons. If you're a high intermediate to advanced shooter, I think it can give you some advantages. I'm glad I went to it, and I'm going to stay with it. I do think that a dot, a laser beam for me, anything past about 10 yards, I have a very hard time getting the laser onto the target and not chasing the laser around. That's just me. So I don't think a red dot's for everyone. I don't think it's an easy way to buy skill. But for an intermediate to an advanced level shooter, I do think that it provides enough advantages and that the disadvantages can be ameliorated, that it's for me. Is it for you? You decide if you want to do the work. You decide if you have the skills. You decide if you want to be able to solve the problems that it solves well, and if you're willing to ameliorate the problems that it brings. And if so, maybe it's for you as well. No matter which way you do it, keep training. Get out there, shoot your gun, do your dry fire practice, do your live fire practice. Get to a class this year. I think it'll help you to be a better shooter regardless of your hardware.